All right. Hey guys, welcome to Google Ads testing below the surface insights that drive performance. I'm super excited to jump into this session with you. My name is Amy Hebdon. Let me go back one. I've been doing paid search management since 2004, which is about 15 years now, and I love being able to work in this area. I've worked at a lot of different companies and agencies and some in-house, but being able to get results for different clients using paid search is really what I love and what I'm passionate about. And I founded Paid Search Magic in, I guess, a few years ago now. And I run it with my husband, James, who also does paid search. So we have a lot of fun managing paid search for our clients and also training digital marketers to get better results for their clients through coaching and courses and trainings like this one. So what we're going to do as we jump into here, when I start trainings, I like to look at what's in it for me. Like, what are you going to get out of this session? What we're going to look at are the kind of hidden areas of Google Ads that can really trip up most marketers because they don't realize that there are these different aspects that can get involved and maybe interrupt their testing plans. So there's a lot of training and tutorials that are available that will teach you how to get better at Google Ads. There's not a lot that helps you better understand the data, understand what you're running, and get meaningful results out of your tests and just what you're running. So we're really going to focus on that primarily. So I'm going to kind of speed through some areas. I'm not going to be explaining how to create an ad or how to do some of this stuff. If you have questions about it, you can certainly tweet me at AmyPPC down here. I'm happy to answer any questions or point you in the right direction, but we're really going to focus the majority of our time on just what you need to know to get the most out of testing so that you're not surprised by any gotchas or the things that happen in Google that can really throw advanced marketers off. The next question that we're going to ask is what's in it for Google? And this is a super important question because Google is motivated by revenue, right? So Google gets paid when advertisers' ads get clicks. Like Google wants to provide a great search engine experience, but they don't get money if people aren't compelled by the ads on top and they go and click one of those organic links, right? Google gets paid when someone clicks the ad. And so it wants your ad to be as compelling as possible. It's motivated to help you get those high click-through rates because high click-through rates for you mean more clicks, which means more money for Google, which they don't get if people aren't clicking your ads. So because of this, Google is very motivated to help improve your click-through rate. So if you are working in Google Ads, you're aware of this, that they're promoting, creating responsive search ads, which gives them multiple headlines and descriptions to test rather than just the ads that you create. And unless you specifically opt out of this, Google will automatically create ads like even without your consent and sometimes awareness if you don't know about this. Google can be creating ads and running them on your behalf. And to even opt out of that, they're saying not recommended, right? It wants every possible chance to create ads that are as compelling as possible to try to get those clicks, which might on its surface seem like a win-win because it's a win for Google because they get the clicks, but it's a win for you because you got the click instead of your competitor. The thing to keep in mind is that unless it's converting on the back end to grow your business, then it really doesn't help you to get a lot of clicks, right? Paid search is all about having the opportunity to put your best ad or best offer in front of your target market when they're most ready to take action. So you want to make sure that the action that people are going to take isn't just clicking your ad, but is actually following through. And so there's a lot of pieces to get in terms of, the landing page experience and the customer experience that you want to be thinking about too, because Google doesn't necessarily care about that as much as your job to care about. So when it comes to testing, a lot of people have a belief that Google Ads has a built-in A/B testing feature. And if we look at A/B testing as the ability to run multiple variants of an element, then that is, of course, true, right? We know that you can run multiple A, B, C, D, E variants of different ads. You can also run multiple variants of different landing pages. You can have keyword level final URLs, or you can have ad level final URLs, or you can be using a tool on the back end that's going to switch these up for you while you're using the same final URL within your Google ad, but you have the ability to test different variants. So that's absolutely true. There is a degree of A/B testing built into Google. What isn't true is that it's a controlled test. It is not a controlled test. And we're going to look at some of the reasons that it isn't. But this is really important to understand because sometimes people mistakenly think that since it's an A/B testing feature, that they're going to get a statistically significant result just by running a large amount of traffic. And remember, if you're using any other optimizing platform, if you're using Optimizely or VWO or anything, those platforms are not compensated depending on how well different variants do. Google is. And so it's important to keep that in mind when you're running any experiment or any changes that you make, that Google is kind of motivated to get the best results. But remember, most likely, if you are a marketer, you are also motivated to get the best results. So when we look at the reasons that a test might not be controlled, one of the huge reasons is you and your ability to do your job. Just like a coach who's brought in to get, to help the team win, not to test with statistical significance the value of a certain supplement or of a certain exercise. Like the goal is to get to win, and your goal is to manage your client's budget or your budget as well as you can and optimize for those opportunities that are going to help you be more successful. And so sometimes that means pulling back budget on things that aren't working or introducing new ads or new concepts. There's a lot of changes that will be made on an ongoing basis. Like the brilliance of Google Ads is that you can respond in real time to what's happening. So when you're responding in real time, you're also invalidating tests. And not everything that you launch has the luxury of sitting around for 14 or 28 or more days just waiting to collect data. You're also usually observing what happens and responding to what happens, which makes it difficult to have a true controlled test. It doesn't make it difficult to do a better job or to optimize, but it makes it difficult to have that part of it be controlled. And like I mentioned before, Google is also not usually going to be a controlled testing environment. This is not uncommon to launch new creatives and see that they do worse. And if you were to stop something, like as soon as you ran it, you wouldn't get true performance over time of how well it does. And this isn't just an AA variance thing. What happens here is that Google is motivated, as we mentioned, to win the click. So when something new comes along and it's not sure how it's going to do, it's going to be a little bit more cautious and limit its exposure. And sometimes that means that it's not going to run it as frequently. Sometimes it means that it's going to be more likely to choose a different ad variant that it knows is more likely to get the click. And sometimes we'll even see the opposite. And this is true a lot of the times where you've got an ad with limited reach, that it's only showing when it's very likely to perform well, which gives it a kind of skewed version of how it does. So this is something else to keep in mind, that, for as much as we try to control, split testing or whatever else, just setting something to rotate evenly doesn't guarantee that we'll get meaningful feedback right out of the gate, because there's also some different things that Google's algorithm is doing to better understand how that ad or any variation is going to be performing. There's also seasonality, and I was looking for something to include in this deck. I looked up oatmeal just to see the seasonality of oatmeal, which is a winter food. So unsurprisingly, we see that this is a Google Trends graph. Interest peaks for oatmeal around winter. And so then I thought, okay, well, what's a good summer breakfast food that I can do to show kind of the difference there? I just thought of smoothies. That's a nice summer food. But smoothies also interestingly peaks in winter, not during the whole winter season, but specifically in January, which makes sense because people are doing weight loss in January, right? And so they're probably looking for smoothie recipes. But we see it peak every single January and then also get more attention, more interest during the summer months before really calming down for the rest of the year. But it's really important to understand how your product or service is being searched, because if you're going to be comparing one month to a previous month or one year to another year, if you understand those trends, that's really going to help you know those differences that are naturally going to come in to your test. Because even like when you just launch something and compare it to something else, you may be missing on seasonality. And that's a big reason that you might not see true controlled tests, because they're happening at different times or different variables. And I think most people are familiar with this concept that the hours and the days, we're going to see different results depending on what time something's running or what day of the week or weekends or holidays or anything else. But all these can affect how your ad copy or your anything performs from one period of time to another period of time. So it's definitely something to be mindful of, and not just look at those two variants in isolation, but to be aware how other things might be affecting it. Another thing you'll see is the search landscape. So down here, you can see this is interest in a specific brand over time. And it kind of starts low, kind of peaks and goes back down again. Whereas this down here is interest in the category over time, which is, more or less continuing to scale up. But where we see brand traffic fall, it's not because of any there's multiple reasons that could be, but a huge reason is because there's less interest over time. So that's something we want to make sure we're keeping in mind when we're looking at the difference in performance. Also, the introduction of different competitors into the market and how they're performing is absolutely going to affect whatever tests or experiments we run. Because once we introduce something, if we're looking at a different landscape now than it was before, we're not running things in a vacuum, then it makes it hard to tell like what is specifically influencing this. And so we have to take these variables into consideration when we're trying to look at the impact of a change that we made. What is the real impact and what is external sources factoring into the behavior that we're observing. So you may be wondering, well, what about Google experiments? Because Google has campaigns, experiment and draft campaigns that we can launch that allow us to control for that. And that is true that there are experiments that you can run within Google that will give you, performance, and it will tell you whether something is statistically significant, and it will give you a confidence interval. What it won't do, though, is control for those things that we talked about before. So if there is something, if you're running an experiment, you are running something at the same time. So something like seasonality, like you're only looking, within one particular time period. So that's less likely to affect it. And Google does a better job of really splitting the traffic better when you're able to, when you have two different campaigns, and it will go, basically on or off within those campaigns. And so it does make it a little bit cleaner. But, if you're running something on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and a weekend performs differently, then just depending on what got the most traffic, what else is going on, you still want to be as responsible and cautious as you can with how you're constructing your tests in the first place, rather than just relying on Google to give you statistical significance. Because as we're going to be talking about, what it is you're testing and how you're measuring it becomes a lot more important than just whether something was split or not. And we'll get to that more further in the session here. You also want to uncover invisible variables. Now, this isn't a real term. This is just my term for it. But there's a lot of areas within Google Ads, particularly within the interface, where you think you're saying one thing, but there's actually more to it than that. And you have to know what you're looking for, or else you will totally miss it. So one example here is search partners. So this ad has a 2.56% click-through rate, as you can see here. But when we expand it out through segments to see search versus partners, the Google platform actually got 13% click-through rate. Search partners got 0.03% click-through rate, which is not uncommon for this client, for search partners. You can see how much more traffic that has. So ultimately, when Google is considering its quality score, it's not looking at what's happening on search partners, just like it doesn't look at what happens on display. It's looking at Google search. So this is what's factoring into the quality score. But when we have everything rolled up, if we're I really think this ad should be doing better than 3%, 100%. Well, it is. It's just when we're looking at the aggregate, that's not obvious. We have to actually dig into it. So if you're trying to make decisions about several different ads and which did better, and what you're seeing is like just the influence of something that's not doing well with a lot more traffic, that's really something to be checking for before you make those decisions, or you might make the wrong decision based on that. Another area where you have to really drill in is ad extensions. And so up here we can see some site links with supposedly, right, a 3+ % click-through rate. And when we actually, if you hit segment and expand your extensions, you'll see that um, the click-through rate that you see is just looking at all the impressions and all the clicks. It's not dividing out by the specific extension. So here, if I thought that this extension was getting a 3.55% CTR, well, it was actually getting a 0.14% click-through rate and only 212 clicks, but combined all in, like this is just the aggregate. This is a roll-up of how the ad did when the extension ran. It is not telling you about the extension. And that's also super important to keep in mind for something like a call out extension, which doesn't get clicked. You will never have a click-through rate for a call out extension, but you will see click-through rates for call out extensions because that's how it runs. And so these are things that are really important to understand when you're looking at performance within the Google Ads interface, because if you don't know that, it's going to throw off your interpretation of your results. So be sure to check your segments, and it's pretty easy to do. You're just within your interface, you're going to click on the little drop down that says segment, and you're going to choose to check on the click type or to check on the conversion type. Device is another really common one. I think that one's a little bit more common, that people know that their mobile traffic might behave differently than their desktop traffic, and you can go and make bid adjustments based on that. But you do want to review, be comfortable and familiar with all of these, because when something happens differently, or one ad or one any sort of element is when there's not an equal distribution of impressions and clicks or conversions or anything, you'll start to see things that are going to, again, kind of mislead how something is actually doing. It's going to be it'll just confuse the data by rolling everything up into the aggregate. Now, another thing that can be confusing is intent variables. And so that's basically your keywords and your search terms are really just indicators of intent. So when you're looking at your ad, you can actually look and see how your ad did against different keywords. And this is why it's super important to have really tight ad groups. So just to kind of back up for a minute, a lot of times people think, well, I can just throw a bunch of keywords and a bunch of ads into a single ad group and Google will match the best one. And it's reasonable to think that, because Google Ads does so much to try to match, the best possible case. They don't really do that much when it comes to ad groups. And so it's really your job to break up your ad groups as tightly as you can so that everything has one theme. So here we see an instance where become a foster parent is the ad, and it has a click-through rate of 0.5 and an average cost per click of 44 cents. When we look at how the words becoming a foster parent, that keyword did, we actually have almost a 6.6% click-through rate, much better with lower cost per click. But when we look down here at child services, which is also for some reason in this ad group, even though I don't see the word child services in the ad, in the headline or in the description at all, unsurprisingly, it drops down to 0.17% click-through rate, which is affecting our aggregate up here with a much higher cost per click and a much lower average position. So you want to make sure that your keywords are all about the same theme, which is also well reflected in your ad. And then taking that one step further, if you have keywords like these keywords where you aren't using the right match types, where you're just using broad match types, or you could even be using exact match types. But if your search term doesn't adequately match what you're trying to do, you can end up with search terms that are really irrelevant, that you don't, that are negatively affecting things. They could either be they're spending a lot, or they're just hugely irrelevant, and so you're not getting the results you wanted. So like abuse of foster children, certainly not something that is is going to be a really good match for this. It does say abuse in the ad though, but like that's probably not the right area. California foster children, where this is not even anything to do with California. There's just some search terms that are going to be affecting the click-through rate, right? They're affecting the performance of the ad, but you couldn't tell just by looking at the ad. So when you're looking at the ad, you're saying which one of these did better, but you're not able to say which one of these correlated with these search terms that we didn't want. And so that's definitely something to keep in mind. That's why you want to make sure that your your keywords and search terms are just as tight as possible around your ad group theme, that your ad is about one landing page. Actually, I'll go over here. One landing page, one main idea for your ads and extensions. That it's you can test all sorts of messaging, but your core theme should be reflected in your ads, in your landing page, in your keywords, and your search term. They should all be about the same thing. Now, as I said before, keywords and search terms are indicators of intent, but we can go even further with how we're going to be measuring and, well, how we're going to be managing for intent. And this is an area that I see people get wrong a lot because they're just not thinking all the way through. So let's look at a real life example where a message match test was performed that could really have been improved by really thinking about intent. So this is from a paid search agency that was wanting to use message match, which hadn't been in place. And so they wrote out a hypothesis, which was that ad set matters. Yes, it does. Consistency of message matters. That is true also. Ad symmetry between ad text and landing page will boost overall engagement with the site and, more importantly, conversion rate. So these are all reasonable things to have a hypothesis about. And most likely, if you were to look at this, it'd be like, yep, that sounds about right, right? It matches what we understand about the importance of message match or consistency. But so let's look at what happened. So there was a controlled optimizely test that ran with it had a hypothesis, a client sign off. The test plan was prepared. It was set up by a certified team. It was implemented correctly. The Google Ads was set up correctly. It had sufficient traffic. There was a completed test report. There was a lot of work that went into it. And at the end of the day, the experiment did not beat the control. Which was surprising for the team because it seemed like a no-brainer. It seemed like this is what you do. You have a message that matches at every single step. Well, let's look at what happened. So the keyword wasn't productivity, but it was something like that. So they're saying the keyword is productivity. Well, the original control had a landing page that did not have productivity in the landing page. It said something to the effect of explore our solutions, right? It was kind of us focused. It didn't really focus on the keyword. It didn't have that consistency throughout it. And so the paid search agency had decided to take them to a page that specifically mentioned the keyword. So, the new brand productivity software for 2019. But the issue is that even though it still said productivity, people were not likely ready to make a purchase, right? Because productivity is a pretty broad idea that just because I'm looking for something about productivity, I could be looking for a lot of different kinds of solutions. I don't feel quite ready to make a specific purchase of a specific software package just yet based on this, right? And I think when you look at it and understand, like this is not a high intent, like there's not a lot of readiness to buy based on this keyword. It doesn't really make sense to be driving to this landing page, but because they weren't really thinking about intent, they were just thinking about message match and testing that and proving that was the right thing to do, that a lot of hours went into something that probably could have been identified much quicker if they had just thought about what's the customer experience? Are they ready for this? Like, is there a way we could say explore our productivity solutions here, include the keyword, but have a few more options? Yes, there is. And at this stage of awareness, that'd be much more appropriate than this crazy idea that every page just needs one specific call to action. Well, not if your visitor is not ready to take that specific call to action. Like, give them choice where they need choice and give them specific direction where that's what they need. But it's all about understanding your user, which is a part of testing. Is understanding where your audience is at and what you can do for them that's going to give them the best result. It's not just dividing everyone up into groups and then saying, well, let's see which does better sentence case or title case. Like your best tests are going to be where you're really thinking about how you're going to solve your visitor problems. A lot of times people just like to create tests. This is a great way to kill an argument, right? Especially like if the person who's responsible for making that decision is pushing it on something else that you don't like, it's easy to say, well, let's let the data decide. Let's just test it. Let's just throw something together and see how it does. But the truth is that data doesn't make decisions. We make decisions. And so the way for us to make the best decisions possible is to be testing meaningful concepts, right? It's not about what does better, lowercase or uppercase. It's about what does my visitor care about? How do I make sure that that is best reflected in the ads? It is best reflected in the landing page, in the overall experience, what happens, after they click, after they convert. So we don't want to just make it about data and just measuring everything. We want to make it about coming up with meaningful hypotheses that relate to what specific problems or challenges your user has, and then solving those and using a test in a controlled way to make sure that you're really learning, like, this thing we're trying to do, is it accomplishing the thing we want to have happen? Because if you're a marketer, your job is still to move that needle. It's not just to measure, it's to get somewhere, but you want to be as controlled as you possibly can to make sure that you're actually going in the right way. And it's not just an issue of randomness because some people get one ad and that some people get the other, and just, it sticks as to what does better. So you do want to use high impact concepts when you test. You want to really understand, like, what is going on with your visitor and how you can improve performance. And when it could be split, when it's like, well, some people like pepperoni and some people like pineapple, that's where you're going to start really segmenting your ad groups and your themes to get more specific. So the people who are looking for this thing are finding what they're looking for, and the people who are looking for the pepperoni are getting to the pepperoni pizza page. Right. You want to review the variables that could be affecting your test. And this is especially true when you're running, when your test is essentially a comparison. Like, I added this new thing, how did it compare to this other thing that ran before? But whether it's like test, comparison in the past, or you're doing one test right now and you have different variants, every time you introduce a new variable, every time you make a change, that's going to affect what's happening. So you want to review your variables. You want to check your segments. Like I was talking about before, like, you're going to dig into segments and see what is possibly affecting the performance of your ads that you are measuring in that roll up. You want to create as tight ad groups as you possibly can to make sure that you're reaching the right people in the right ways. And you want to match and control for intent, because at the end of the day, it's all about intent. And if you can give someone what they're looking for when they go to a search engine to ask their question, to look for the solution they want, or even when you're, running a shopping ad or a YouTube ad or a display ad, if you can get the right intent at the right time, the performance is going to be just out of the water better than what you'll see if you just kind of take a diffused group and just say, well, which does better, A or B? Like, you really want to be reaching the right people and really getting something from that test. So I hope this helps. Again, if you have any questions, just tweet me at AmyPPC. Thank you so much.